a particular focus for us has been on the regulation of medical devices. And as in Brazil and in most countries, medical devices have been said to include software only. So it doesn't have to be a hard device with AI in it. It doesn't have to be something like a cochlear implant with AI in it. It could just be the software if it has an impact on healthcare or health, if it's being used for a medical purpose. Then, under the definition in Canada and in the US, in the UK, in Brazil, as I understand it, and most of the big markets, AI software alone is included as a medical device. So that in Canada is actually a really important possibility, because in Canada, under the Constitution, healthcare is generally interpreted to be something that the provinces have control over. So, provinces are similar to your states. So, and this often leads to a lot of problems because we have one thing happening in Ontario and another thing happening in Alberta, and nobody really agreeing on anything. But in this case, Health Canada, the federal government, has jurisdiction over medical devices. It can regulate there because it regulates the safety and the quality of medical devices. And so this is a really important thing to get right, because if Canada at the federal level can get this regulation right, then it would ensure safe and effective health AI, hopefully, across the country. And it would also mean for innovators that they really have one place that they have to go to meet the requirements for entry into the market, and they don't have to deal with 10 provinces and 3 territories. So I just want to emphasize for Canada, this is a very significant opportunity. So here, we've been working away on the current approach to regulation of medical devices in Canada and whether it is good enough to meet the challenges that are coming with AI. So there are so many benefits from health AI, perhaps more than in any other sector. And I say that because, as you all probably know, there's a lot of human error that happens in healthcare. Doctors, nurses, pharmacists, radiologists, they make mistakes. And when they make mistakes, sometimes patients are hurt or even die. And it is, there's so much opportunity there for AI to support better decision making, and in some cases to replace medical decision making, but more generally to support medical decision making to help ensure better decisions. So there's a lot of opportunity here, but also, as you've probably been discussing, many risks. So risks around safety, obviously. If the AI is incorrect, then this is a problem in some very significant ways, and particularly if, for example, all hospitals are using a particular form of AI software. If it fails, it might take quite a long time to really realize that it's failing, and it would be an across-the-board failure, not something happening by one doctor or one pharmacist or one hospital. So that is, I think the risks are, on the whole, we hope that healthcare will be a lot safer because of AI, but there still are risks that need to be attended to. So briefly, and I'm happy to share my slides with you all to review with more time. The problems that we currently have with our regulation in Canada is that essentially machine learning tools, so machine learning AI, is basically not permitted. Fixed AI, it has to be fixed in time, and anything that actually changes over time, which is, inherently what machine learning is, that it will evolve and change. We hope for the better. But the fact of change is something that currently our regulations do not permit. So if it changes its function in any kind of significant way, then in theory it has to come back for reapproval by Health Canada. And of course, this is simply not really workable. So going forward, what needs to happen is that for machine learning to be permitted, we have to have much more of a focus on what we call post-market surveillance, right? So after the machine learning tool comes on the market and is in play in the healthcare system, we need to be monitoring it. We need to pick up if there are any changes that seem to be adversely affecting patients. If there are any outcomes that look worrying, we need to be able to keep on top of all of those things and report back to the regulator if anything worrisome is happening like that, and pick up those signals across Canada and maybe even the world. So there's a lot to do here on post-market surveillance, and I would say, at least for Canada, that we're a long way behind the 8 ball. I don't know if you say that in Brazil, but anyway, we're far behind where we need to be to really respond to this modern need. And our colleagues who are innovators also tell us that that even for fixed AI, so AI that is not machine learning, that it will degrade as well. It will change, and as it's applied in different contexts across Canada, big cities, very remote rural places, very different populations, that this is a big risk, even with fixed AI. So again, it goes to this incredible importance of post-market surveillance. And so if you see that as number 6 on the list, the post-market surveillance is critical, but so far we don't have great structures. With the limited time I have, I'm just going to talk about 2 others. One is the issue of algorithmic bias. And again, you've probably spoken about this at some length already. Algorithmic bias is obviously a concern because if the AI or machine learning product is trained on data that is not representative of the patients that it's used on. So if it's trained on white Caucasian males and is used primarily on, pregnant women, for example, then it may be that it doesn't perform as well as it should. There may be risks. There may not be. It may be that there's really no difference, but we don't know. So AI algorithmic bias is a real concern. And currently in Canada's regulations, there's no specific statement about that. Health Canada says, look, this is something we consider when we look at the safety, but there's no specific regulations demanding that the innovator, at least I would say, explain the risk of algorithmic bias. Is there a risk here? What's the nature of this risk? Was it feasible to actually train the data? Is there data available that could be representative of the population that it'll be used on? If the answer is no, that the data isn't available, then other kinds of measures might be needed, such as a warning. on the product about the risk of algorithmic bias and the nature of that risk. And again, it goes back to the statement I made about the criticality of post-market surveillance. Like, this is essential. So my advice to Brazilian decision makers and policymakers is, this is a thing you need to figure out. The most important thing, I think. So the other piece I would just say is another interesting feature is the which we see, I think, in a number of regulations, and is this idea that if there are humans involved, so if there's a doctor involved or a nurse involved, that this will be a safety check. And I think we may have to check our assumptions at the door about this. And I worry about this idea having too much power, that if a doctor is using AI, then somehow the doctor will know how the AI works and the machine learning tool works. They're going to jump in and understand the algorithm and catch any mistakes. I think that's too much to ask of most ordinary doctors and nurses. You might have the odd, person who's a computer scientist as well, but even for them to understand how the algorithm is deciding at any point in time, I think is deeply problematic. And you have the other risk that they might override AI decision-making because they think they're right? They think, oh, well, I know better than the AI, and it might actually be making mistakes. So I think we really want to make sure that the products are safe, and that's more of a population perspective. That's why, again, I come back to the post-market surveillance and the criticality, I think, of regulation to make sure that the products are as safe as they possibly can be as they come onto market, and that we monitor them over time to make sure that they are safe over time and in different places, and as they evolve or devolve in application to different populations. And Brazil is a vast and beautiful country, and even more populated than Canada, with a massive population and great variation and need. So the setting up these structures to monitor the application in different contexts will be essential too.